Welcome to the Perspective Podcast, where we embrace open dialogue from different perspectives about entrepreneurship, relationships, and education.
And this open dialogue is needed, especially today, as we live in a Twitter finger society where everyone seems to care more about getting their point across than they are about hearing the other person's perspective.
If you're ready to grow your business, your relationships, and your personal development, stick with us here at the Perspective Podcast, because sometimes in life, to get to the next level, you just need a different perspective.
If I look like what I've been through, I'd be roadkill. Tell me off of the pavement, I'm reeking from the...
One. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Mouzon. Got T here with me. Say what's up, T.
Bang, bang, bang. Just like last week.
Just like last week. You got to get it down, man. There it is.
It's my new thing.
That's it. See you hanging out in your beach house. Hanging out in your beach house now.
Oh yeah, I decided to come in today to the house down the road. You know how it goes, man. Got to mix it up for you guys.
I get you, man. I get you. You're busy. You want to experience life, right? So today we do it at the beach house.
We do it at the beach house.
Hope everybody is well. Thank you again for checking in and listening. Again, we always appreciate all of you. Today, just another episode for you to give this perspective. You know, we're having some conversation before we started rolling. And this topic kind of popped up, and we said, yeah, this has got to be something that we talk about right now, just because, we've talked about some of this stuff before, but now just kind of diving down the path of, the mainstream media and the narrative that it creates, right? Everyone has a perspective around the information they hear, where they hear it from, the sources, all of those types of things. And the mainstream media and media in general, media outlets, whether it's television, whether it's social, whether it's newspapers or whatever the case is, media outlets in general play a big role in what we think about and what we consume, in the narrative that's created in our society. And there's some things that start to pop out, and we'll talk about it, specifically in this episode. We'll probably bounce around to a few different things. But one thing that had popped up recently was back in the lines of politics, right? Back into politics. I know everybody, we kind of went there last year because it was the thing it was the narrative, right? We had a huge election season and all these things, and all the racial tension and everything that's happening, and that's forefront. So we are diving into politics. I dove into politics for once, right? Like, had that kind of change of heart, right? And said, hey, we got to do something here. So it's on my radar. But then what's very interesting is after the election, after all of the craziness in the beginning of, the year, whatever it was, like after all of this, politics kind of fell off the radar because it was no longer in the news. It was no longer the mainstream thing, the biggest thing to talk about. And I've fallen victim to it because I took my eye off the ball, or I took, my finger off the pulse of politics. And just recently, there was an article that popped up specifically talking about something that's important to all of us.
Yeah.
Yet many of us may have not have heard about this. And if you did, kudos to you. But I'll tell you, I hadn't heard about it until earlier this week, maybe a few days ago. And T, I think you're just finding about it.
Yeah, I think as I was thinking about it some more, I think I heard about somebody thinking about doing something about it. Yeah. But not actually like a legit bill that got passed. No.
So what we're talking about, and I'll let T kind of fill you in and maybe read a little bit of it. But what we're talking about is there was an article that passed, and I mean, just honestly, there was a bill that passed the House that is trying to wipe away voter suppression. It's really legislating all of the issues, for those of you that were paying attention to what was happening in Georgia, right? All of the issues that was happening throughout this election and the election season. They're literally just passed the bill in the House, now is going to the Senate, that is going to wipe away basically all of those issues, really add some governance, if that's the best word, from the federal level to regulate states in how they're able to count a vote. And I feel like this is one of maybe the biggest bills that we've seen to restore our democracy and put something back into the hands of the people, which is what we've been talking about the election season, but no one knows about this. Like, no one's heard, like, this isn't on the news. Like, this is something that happened to pop up. So what's the mainstream media's role in this? Like, is this something they're trying to hide? Is this like, have we taken our eye off the ball? Like, what are your thoughts on this thing? And maybe give some context, but also give your thoughts on this.
Okay. I think it's a little bit of both. Well, both meaning I think we naturally, I'll be honest, I was exhausted.
I think most people were, right? Most people were.
Yeah, we were just exhausted, right? And exhausted not because like I was out there campaigning or anything of that nature. Like, mind you, it went down to the last few days when I decided I was going to even vote or not. So, and we've talked about that, right? Like, you were like, yep, voting. I was like, I don't know now, right? So I'm not exhausted because I was out there on the campaign trail with Biden or Trump or whatever you think I voted for, right? It doesn't, like, whatever. But it's one of those things where I think we've had some fatigue and we're tired and we just want to move on, right? We fall back to the level where we really are, right? Like, we talk about that, right? Like, do people rise to the moment, or do they really just fall back to where they are, right? Like, once it comes down to it. And I think really as a society, we just fell back to what we were. We don't pay attention. We really don't care. We just want to make sure all the systems are there and nobody's being too much of a douchebag, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's offending me in my personal truth, right? That's just really where it's at. But then also I do think, and it sucks that I say this, that the House did pass a bill. And so if people wonder what that bill is, it's House Resolution 1. And I'm going to read this here really quick. It says, which touches on virtually every aspect of the electoral process. It was approved 220 to 210, which is directly across by partisan lines. It would restrict partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts, strike down hurdles to voting, and bring transparency to a murky campaign financial system that allows wealthy donors to anonymously bankroll political causes. Right? So essentially, it's shedding light, in layman's terms, to the people that are donating your favorite candidate that nobody knows about. It's also striking down any state or district that's causing hurdles, like making people got to do certain things. For example, back in the days, you used to have to take a literacy test before you were allowed to vote. Like, in the Black community, literally, you can go back and look at this up. If you didn't pass the literacy test, then you could not be allowed to vote. And so guess who couldn't pass the literacy test because our schools were terrible, if we even had schools? Black people, right? So these are extreme, situations, but they have other hurdles that are still there. And then gerrymandering, which is really a problem where essentially a state can come in or a district can come in and say, all right, we have, let's say, 100,000 Black people in this community. We don't want them to be their own district. I'm using this for an example, so don't get all funny because I'm using Black people, right? So we have 100,000 people, Black people in this community, but we have 5 communities of white people around them. We don't want the Black community to be their own district, because then if they all voted one way, then they would win a district and that would count towards the points for the state, if you will. So what we'll do is we'll break that Black community up, filter all parts of that district into other, let's call it the white communities that think differently, right? And then they can all vote however they want to, but they will never be the majority of any of the other districts. Thus, we keep everything one color, whether that's blue or red, whatever. So that's just kind of how that works. Yes, that really happens. That's legitimate. Like that is legitimately what happens, right? That's how you get some of these states that have massive populations of minorities that you tend to see vote one way, but that state or those districts go a whole nother way. You're like, but how does that work? That's how it works. Now, both parties use it. However, you just have to say, the truth is Republicans use it more, right? They use it more. There was a huge issue with this about a decade ago where it really got brought to light, but we're still dealing with things of it, the results of it till today. So that's just a little snapshot of that. But this bill, whose fault is it? I unfortunately think the Senate got some negotiating going on now, right? And whenever I feel like the politicians are negotiating, nobody hears about it, because the politicians are going to make sure this rolls out the way they want it to roll out. And I do believe that there's going to be some bipartisan agreement, and I believe that they're getting the nuts and bolts, out. Because if it wasn't, and it was a Democrat thing pushing, you would see a first page every day on CNN. In my opinion, I would see people talking about it on Facebook. I would see all these things. I've watched how this machine has worked before. And usually when it gets quiet and things get passed, it doesn't typically always benefit everybody. It typically benefits a few. Now, I'm praying that this is different, right? Like, this is me and Chris giving our perspectives. I'm pretty sure some political science major that just graduated from college, $200,000 in debt, is going to debate us on that, right? Like, I guarantee that's going to happen. However, this is just what I feel, what I've seen in my small piece of investigation and experience. But I'm optimistic that something like this does pass. It is transparent. We do actually see, like, I don't understand how anybody is upset with not suppressing votes.
Right.
When I literally just watched half of the country talk about they had their vote suppressed or taken away or miscounted or whatever else. Yeah. I just watched half the country complain about it.
So again, this is like to specifically talk about the bill. Like, literally every Republican opposed it. Every single one of them opposed it. So they opposed it for a reason, right? They opposed it.
Now, what is that reason? I didn't get that reason.
Don't know.
Come on.
You can make some assumptions, right? You can make some assumptions. You could take it to a race thing. I think it's about control and power. But honestly, if I think about this because if we go back to the heated election season and how the country was so split, and right, the ideas, what you would hear from a lot of the Republican side is that, like, this socialist, like, this stuff that, like, you guys want all this money and the government this, and so one step away from socialism, like, that is still probably their thought. If the Democratic vote, if the minority vote becomes the popular vote, right,
it leans left,
right, then
they're going to vote those things.
Then what's going to happen is we're going to lean more towards that side, because that is typically the mindset of most, I don't even know if you want to call it underprivileged people or like whatever you want to call it. That is the mindset. So, like, there will be a clash, because if the so-called Republicans let this side say, hey, well, now all of your votes count, and from the poorest of the poor to everybody, the thought processes are going to be completely different, and it will lean more towards, I need more help. We expect more from you, government. We expect more for you to do for us. And that is starkly different from what a Republican, and we're making generalizations, but
super generalizations,
but that's
because they ask for help with lend me more money.
With capitalism. I'm trying to grow. I want to
help me create more jobs.
Exactly. Basically.
And then the other side is like, give me a job.
Give me a job. Give me more money. And that battle, it's going to play out. So, like you said, I think the point that you made is, like, when politics comes off the radar, when it comes off of the mainstream media, when it's not being talked about, there's definitely things happening behind the scenes where these politicians are having conversations, just like you said, to roll this out properly, because this is a big deal. This is a huge deal. It's a huge deal.
Like this literally we should be hearing about this like it's an election season.
Absolutely.
And by the way, if you live in Pennsylvania or anywhere near here, it is election season coming up. We're in election season. That was another point.
Now. Some of you guys listening may know or may not know, we live in Pennsylvania, and I had no idea. It just so happens that I happen to have a friend that's running for a form of office in Harrisburg, which is the capital, or that county, and she posts things to say like, hey, May 18th is election. I'm like, what election? Like, what are you talking? Like,
I
if it
got the
weren't for
signs.
her,
I
I
only
would have.
knew because I went to 7-Eleven. I saw a sign.
See, like, you live in a community where people put it out. I'm in a
Yeah.
community. I don't see anything around my community about this stuff. So I happen to see it, one post on Facebook from somebody that's running and says, mate, like, how do we know? Why did we take our eye off the ball? Like, this is my issue, right? And again, I'm guilty of this. So I'm trying to work through, because, you know, go back a few episodes, right? Like, you hear us passionately talking about politics and the landscape and how this is going to get us deeper into our local politics. But we went right back. We literally went right back
to our normal.
Right. So like, who keeps us accountable? Like, are we subjected to mainstream media? Like, how do we keep ourselves accountable to
mainstream media? Is hurting the cattle. Let's just call it what it is. Mainstream media hurts the cattle. And the problem is, we can argue that social media, it's a form of hurting the cattle with their algorithms and what they choose and don't choose to allow to be posted, right? And so we live in a society that's disconnected while interconnected, and our brains naturally function in a way of habits. Like, that's the way our brain works. Our brain, anytime you get something confusing, our brain is like, no, shut down. That's just how our natural brains work. It's trying to conserve energy. So processing through things, you have to consciously try to process through. And if it's too confusing, our brains will say, no, rejection. And so this is where we are. We want things easy. We want to look at something, size it up. We determine, is this dangerous? Is this something that meets my values? Do I have to think through this? No, maybe I do, but can I generalize it enough, rationalize it? Cool, keep it pushing. And so when you have all these things, so you have your natural brain working against you, you have the media, you have your social media, all designed to get you in this particular place of not thinking, just following, not thinking, just listening, not thinking, just doing. This is how you get a divided country.
It's crazy.
It's how you get a divided country.
We fall victim to these distractions so much, right? Like, it's scary to think that like something else and other things have such control over what we think about our actions and the things that we do. But this is just one of those instances, right? Like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you know, another thing that just happened recently, you know, the Derek Chauvin case, right? Getting, you know, that now coming back to light, and putting, again, kind of, you know, our racial equity, the racial injustice back on the platform, right?
On the platform,
it put it right back up, front and center, like right back up. And if you think about it, like the shootings that led up to this, like think of how this works. Like, we go from none of this to like 4 shootings and killings back to back, mainstream media, Derek Chauvin. And then like, it's so manipulative that like at some point you have to question, like, why is this happening? Like, why? And they were saying this, tie this back to politics. You know, they were saying, like, I think Candace Owens said this sometime, like, it's so easy to manipulate Black people's emotions through the media. What we choose to think about, when we choose to get upset, when we choose to be cool. Like, all you do is put some images, put some triggering things, do some, and then you're thinking about this. Yet over here, they're creating laws to be able to like stop us from voting. Right?
She's
like,
right. She's right. She's biased. She's right. But she left out white people too.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you think about our country. What did they do when one of the first films about Black people? We were a murderer, ravaged, right? And so people got afraid of us because we killed white women. Like, that was our reputation, right? Like, Trump showed how to do that on the other side. You know, it was our criminal pictures in the 80s. I remember that they posted, they made sure they put up. But then when they had a white criminal, they didn't put their mugshot up. They put like a family photo up or something with them showing that they were human, right? Like, so she's correct, but it ain't just Black people. Like, you know what I mean? And now, mind you, her job is to be polarizing. She's a media pundit as well, right? Like, and we know that, right? There's a lot of truth that she speaks. I can't argue truth, right? But at the same time, I'll also, because it's a perspective podcast, it's the same way, right? Like, how are white people inherently afraid of us, right? Like, how are they inherently afraid of us when they've never even been around us?
It's so funny that that's the way the conversations go. I'm actually listening to a podcast on Audible. We've got answers. I don't know. It's Charlemagne and like a bunch of different yeah. It was and so like
I think I've heard of it, but I haven't listened to any episodes yet.
Ebony K. Williams in that podcast. So all of them are snippets. It's like, so the way that the podcast goes, and I'll plug it because it's a great podcast. It's on Audible. And basically it's James, I can't say his last name, Altucher. James Altucher. He interviews all these different Black people that are, whether they're community advocates or whatever, like they've, been there. So like Ebony K. Williams and Dr. Claude Anderson and like all these different, Teslin Figueroa, like all these different people. And Ebony K. Williams, she's an attorney, like she's a lawyer by trade, right? An attorney by trade. And she goes into some of the history of like, again, how Black people have been depicted for our entire, like in this country for hundreds, like since slavery.
Since we came on a slave ship.
Since we came here, it's all been about how we've been depicted. And that is unconsciously in people's minds, Black people and white people. She gave the example, like, this is why women, Black and white, will cross the street if a Black man is walking down the street. Like that, it's just what happens. It's not because like it's just in the minds of white people. It's in the minds of all of us because this is how we've been positioned in the minds of people over time. And so, I don't really remember kind of where we were going with that, but that just reminded me of listening to that part of that podcast. Because it is very much so about how we've been depicted. And again, the role that mainstream.
But the media knows.
Exactly.
They play that. That's where we were, right? Because you gave an example of like, yes, you can rattle Black people up because there's still a lot of trauma. Now, should we have it or should we not? That's debatable, right? Like, you know what I mean? I don't think you can tell anybody, it's time for you to stop having trauma if you ain't dealt with it, right? Exactly. Right? Like, I still got some trauma from my childhood. I'm 36 years old.
We all got it. We all got it. And
and so we talking hundreds of years of generations of passing down trauma. Yeah. But look, if you don't know, the media is a money-making machine first. Good, hopeful, thoughtful, fun stories do not sell, period. I remember Van Jones, right? They used to have a show on CNN. I don't know if they still have it, but I remember him talking once. And he said they had this show, and it was like a debate show. It was like 7 of them. And it's like, this is what they all do now, right? Like, they always have the one other person, right? But it was like 7 of them. And it was almost like half and half. And they would argue, go back and forth. And then for 50 minutes, right? Then the last 10 minutes of the show, they go on a segment and they had to come back and they all talked about what they did agree on and how we can move forward.
I remember that. Yeah.
Right? And then he said ratings would plummet on that last 10 minutes. Yeah. People stopped watching. Nobody cared about the solution. Nobody cared, like not nobody, but like significantly amount of people, it would tank. So the people, like, it's so like we are out here, unity. But then the data shows we only watch the train wreck. Right?
We want conflict.
We want the conflict. Yeah. So we're paying for what we're paying with this unity. I don't think that's the word, like non-unity, whatever, right? But we're yelling unity. We need to stop it because nobody, like, the news media proves we full of like, because they keep producing it, and they keep Nike, they keep Reebok, they keep, I don't know if Reebok on there, GM, they keep Morgan Stanley. They name all these companies that keep advertising there. Because guess what? We keep putting our eyeballs on it, period. And so we can talk all this stuff we want, but because our eyeballs are fixed on the machine that manipulates, then we are lying to ourselves. Like, I'm just being real. We're lying to ourselves. I have to get real with myself, right? Like, after the election, I was like, damn, I watched a lot of damn CNN. Like, I'm being honest. Like, I was like, now, mind you, at the time, I was like 75%, probably 80% CNN, but I would always like, I got to watch Fox. I got to see what's happening. Right. And I would watch things happen, and then I would have two different TVs up and see the headlines and how they manipulated the same story. Right. Like, I would do that. But then I realized, I was like, hold on, I can't just watch CNN because they're designed to rattle me up. I can't just watch Fox because they're either rattling me up or pissing me off. Right. And then CNN was pissing me off too. So then I was like, I'm not watching none of y'all. Like, I literally, like, after the election, I was like, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Nope. I got caught up in the sauce. You know what I mean? I got caught up in the sauce. I justified a bad solution because I was trying to solve a bigger problem.
Sure. But getting caught up in the sauce is the key, because I think that's where we're all getting caught. We're all getting caught in the sauce, like,
because we want something better.
Right. Because we want something more, but we start to see the things over and over and over again that we don't want or that we want, right? Yeah. It consumes us. Mm-hmm. It's a consumption thing. It's what we're being consumed by. And whenever we stop consuming that one thing, it seems like we consume just another thing. Like, it's like our attention just— it's the
same thing, just painting picture in a different box.
That's it.
But it's the same thing.
That's it, right?
It's the same thing. Like, CNN do you really think CNN wants unity? CNN needs to write $1 billion check to Donald Trump. I'm here to say it, put that on record. Because remember, if you don't, and like, real talk, right before Trump really was like, I'm going to run, and people started like being like, hold up. People were on the media's head. Sure. I'm talking about like Fox News. Everybody was kind of like, nah, man, we ain't messing with them no more. And that was starting to be the tone. Trump gets on the scene, gave it something to talk about. And then all the people who were down with his conversation ran to Fox. Everybody else ran to CNN and everything else in between. If those are the two spectrums, I think there's deeper spectrums, but you know what I mean, right? Because I've heard some stuff on the left and the right. I'm like, I don't even know how y'all boys get, like, I don't know, the internet guys ain't shut y'all down yet. But anyways, but what happened was, and then as soon as Trump came on the scene, it gave us something to talk about. And then he kept being himself, which made for wonderful news coverage. Man, I think I read a story of how he wiped his butt one time. Like, I'm telling you, like, then the staffers was getting in on it. They was taking shots and they was feeding information out. This was the most dysfunctional presidency. And it was perfect for the news media. Perfect. Every time something went well, Fox has something to grandstand on. Every time something went bad, CNN has something. And this, like literally the news media should all get together and say, hey, you got 200 million on it, I got 200 million on it, because this dude made us way more money.
And they might have been doing that anyway. Like, that's the whole purpose.
They owe him a check, bro. They owe him a check.
Listen, this again, you're just making the point. You're making the point of how easily things are manipulated for ratings, for, like, you know, one of the things that I've been saying a bunch now, thanks to my guy, Kobe, he says, follow the money, right? Yeah. Hashtag follow the money. Anytime you use your critical thinking skills to be like, why is it like that? Follow the money, right? Like, who's incentivized by doing these things? Where is the money? Yeah. Follow that, and you'll get to the place where you see, oh, this is why we're getting this. And again, back to that mainstream media, back to, like, there's money behind all of this stuff. There's dollars behind things. They got to
keep your eyeballs. They make money with you watching.
That is the business. That is the business that I don't think people understand. And again, no fault of everyone. Like, we've fallen victim. We're just talking about this. We've fallen victim to this. The difference is, can you catch it? Like, do you understand that you're—
can you stop being a victim? A victim has no control. A victim is powerless, right? Now you know if we know, you can choose now to be a victim or not.
Exactly.
And that's what we're talking. That's why we're having this conversation. People are like, why are you mixing in this conversation? Because it's perspective. Like my life has been so much better once I turned off the news.
Exactly.
like in the back of my psyche, there's certain people, and I hate to do it, but there were certain people I literally had to block on social media. Like, and I don't like to block different perspectives because I feel like, am I like just trying to hear what I want to hear? Mm-hmm. I still have plenty of people, trust and believe, because I'm in like a lot of real, they think a little bit differently at times.
Yeah.
And I still hear it, but there were some people I had to literally shut off because it was just too much. Yeah. It was terrible. Yeah. It was too much. Shut off the news, shut off a lot of stuff on social media, revamp my algorithm, and I've been more peaceful.
Yep.
There's still people on there talking. I see them every now and then. Joe Biden sneezed wrong. Look at what he did. I told you I should have voted for Trump. Like, and I'm like, bruh, he sneezed. Like, he just sneezed. Like I told Trump would have never done that. I know he wouldn't have. That's why we didn't vote him in. Like, we didn't want that decision to be made, right? Like, there's still a bunch of people out there, and then like kind of going back to the police officer's case. Then you have stuff on the news, like with Brett Favre, right? You heard what he said, right?
I saw the headline. I actually didn't dive in. I saw the headline.
Okay, so he says essentially, right? I'm not quoting, but essentially he says it's hard for me to believe that the cop intentionally murdered George Floyd.
Right.
I'm not saying his actions were right. But it's hard for me to believe that he intentionally murdered him. Right. Well, Brett Favre, he wasn't charged with intentionally murdering him. Right. He wasn't charged with intentionally murdering him. Right. He was charged with manslaughter, second-degree murder, unintentional murder. So for you to say that, it's like a calling card that the media pundits on a particular side of things will run and jump on. And can be like, yeah, see, he didn't mean to do that. Of course he didn't. Like, we all agree. Right. But that's the narrative. And that's the narrative. And then that's how you keep things from not changing. Because then the media runs with that. And guess what? You said the headline. What's the headline in CNN? Brett Favre says that, Brett Favre said, I'm not saying CNN had this headline, but it's like Brett Favre said he doesn't understand why he's being charged, right? Like, that's what the headline will be. And then CNN and Fox News would say, Brett Favre agrees that the cop didn't mean to do it. Well, okay, so then you're like, well, yeah, he didn't mean to do it. So why is he being charged? People aren't going to the next level, but that's what the media would do, right? Like, I had to watch a 25-minute segment on one of my favorite sports debate shows, Undisputed, about Brett Favre's comment, right? And then they have their narrative because they're, that's Fox Sports, which is different from Fox News, right? They got sold a while ago. So you see, you're like, Fox and Fox don't compete, but then you go watch ESPN with Stephen A. and Max, and they're Disney, so you know where they're at on things. And then you have like this massive narrative, and it's all being manipulated, it's all being controlled. And what I'm trying to say for sure, I know Chris, I'm pretty sure he's with it, is you have to control your own narrative. You have to be mindful of the machines that's feeding you information to manipulate a lot of times, unfortunately, and to get where they want you to be in the state of mind they want you to be, so that you can keep your eyeballs on it, so that they can keep making money. They don't really care about our well-being when it comes down to it.
Right. That's right.
What's the number one, what did they say? The number one engine that causes depression is what? Engine? Right now. Yeah, it's Facebook.
Like social media type of thing?
Yeah, social media, yeah. They're explicitly tied to Facebook.
Yeah.
So who's campaigning to get off Facebook? Yeah. It's the number one cause of depression right now in America. Have you ever heard any headline on the news?
I haven't, but even that headline though, T, it's placing blame. It's placing blame because there's you have the choice.
But that's my point.
Right, yeah, right? But
so it's a toxic environment.
Yeah, maybe to some, because mine isn't.
To some, maybe.
Mine doesn't make me depressed, right? Like
mine did. Mine did, and I had a lot of both sides. It was just terrible.
But again, like this goes down to
I won't say depressed, but you know what I mean.
But but this goes to that point. Like, can we control what, like, our actions? Our actions are that like, yes, we might have been influenced.
Yes.
But you chose to turn on CNN. You chose to turn on Fox News. You chose to block that person when you were done. You chose. All these things were of choosing, but we get sucked into the sauce.
The sauce. That's what I'm saying. Like, the sauce.
But we're gonna get sucked into any sauce. That's why I don't put it just on like social media. If social media wasn't around and we were still had the ability,
we would read the newspaper and be sucked in the sauce.
Exactly. Right. Either way, we're gonna get sucked in the sauce. Back in the day, it was watching channel 3, 6, or 10 news at 6 o'clock, and we get sucked into the sauce. Like, that is what it's amplified now. It's amplified, but we have to, and this is the point of kind of us talking about this. Like, you have to be aware that that's what's happening, and not think that this is real life, because it's only a segment of what they're showing you. Because again, to just give context to the whole thing again, we can talk all we want about politics, and you still don't know that this bill is about to pass. Like, you still don't know it, right? Or, I saw this meme, and I don't know how much this is true, so like, it is what it is. But like, whatever headlines it is that we're seeing, child trafficking still hasn't gone down. Like, there's still like 800 women missing or something. You know what I mean? Like, something crazy that like no one's paying attention to. There's always going to be things that no one's paying attention to because we're distracted by this narrative.
Because it's what is selling. Like, and that's the point, right? Like, I mean, that's what we're getting to, right? Like, if that's your only means of information, you're being controlled.
Absolutely.
Like, you have, no, let me say it this way. You have, because somebody can be like, ain't nobody controlling me. So let me rephrase that, right?
Well, to that person, someone is controlling. Like, if
I don't speak in absolutes, right? Like, I'm learning that, right? There's someone seriously trying to control, and you are putting yourself in a situation to be controlled. I'll say it that way, right? Because I don't want to say anybody is being controlled or not being controlled, right? I don't like to speak absolutes anymore. So with that being said, you have the ability to pick and choose. We all know that. Just be cognizant of what's coming in. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, right? We're bringing this bill up because as a part of this bigger conversation, is because that bill is super important. Like, now to me and Chris being very vulnerable, we haven't got in and read the bill. Like, we got the highlights of the bill, the framework. But again, is the framework what it really is, right? What they call it, the pork belly, the pig belly part of the bill is where it really happens at. So in all fairness, we haven't read it yet, but from what we see from the outside, it looks like something that we should all be able to get to agree upon, unless this bill is causing you to lose your power position. Then I can understand why. However, there's a reason why 210 Republican representatives voted against it. So I do think that requires more investigation for me to understand why another side would truly all agree that this was not a good thing. 210 people is a lot of people, right? It's a lot of people to say no.
They didn't get one person.
They didn't say one person?
One person say yes. Like, there's
even some of them voted against Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
And they didn't say yes to this. So like,
they didn't say yes. So there got to be something. There got to be more. But see, this is what we're talking about. See how we're like, I hope this is a good example of, we may think something, but let's get more information.
Critical thinking.
Let's just get some more information.
This is critical thinking skills that I think we've lacked, or somehow, and this might all tie together, from the information, from the distractions, from social and all this stuff. It's caused us to not be able to critically think, to not be able to say, oh, I see that. Why? What's the source? Like, really critically think about the
Tell
information.
Tell me more.
Yeah, that's being presented. Like, go deeper. That's, you and I have that, but I really think this is something that's lacking for most people. Is like, you just take information as it is, and whatever you're being fed, that's why it's called a feed. Whatever you're being fed, you just take and you eat and you're like, okay, I consume this. This is what it is. Right.
Yeah.
This is exactly what it is. But you never actually ask, like, well, why is it this way? Well, how did it get this way? Like you asked, why would 210, why would every single Republican go against it? Every single one. Does that mean like we're still this split? Is it this bad? Like what is happening?
Yeah. Is this a political bill? Is this or is there literal merit against the bill?
Right.
Right. Like maybe there's something I'm not missing. Right. Now I will say this, and I think this is a good point. Right. I want to make sure people don't sometimes. I'm learning that sometimes people don't want to question the other side of what they feel and they think is because somehow they feel like their own belief system is being shaken. Right. Like they feel like to question themselves or their own thinking is like it rattles them to their core, and people don't want to be unrattled. Like I don't want to be, right? Like this is something I had to deal with when I was thinking about things outside of how I grew up in church. Like I started asking different questions, and in church they're like, don't be asking that question, what you know about what? Jesus the way, he's the reason, he's the rock, he's the this, he's the that, that's it, right? And I'm like, okay, I can still believe that Christ came, died, rose again for all the things that the Bible says,
right,
and still say, but what they talking about over there, like that, and that's okay. Like there's another group of millions of people that believe something totally different, and maybe they believe it, and everything that you're saying is right. But I still want to. It's still okay to ask the question,
right,
because there is a scripture that I believe it says, "Knock and the door shall be open." Right. Ask and you shall receive. Right. So it didn't say just ask things about the church, the denomination, which Mama said. It said ask. So there is nothing wrong, and it's safe to go, if you're a Democrat, to go to the Republicans to say, why don't y'all like this? Like for real, like take politics off, no BS. Like maybe I'm missing something. Like maybe we can make this better. And this is why I would be a bad politician. This is why. Because I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to say, hey, you guys seem to be very, very, headstrong, opposite of me on this. Is there anything that you do agree with? Okay, perfect. We come to a conclusion on that. Now, what is it that you don't agree with? Because you seeing it, I'm seeing it. But if we come together, man, we can, because at the end of the day, aren't we working for our people? Aren't we working for the people ultimately? Like, and I know there's going to be some differences, right? Because there's some states that if certain things happen, it can hurt their industries. You know what I mean? So I get there's going to be some challenges there. Take that off the table. Right. But most importantly, it's all for all of us, generally speaking, anyway. And so if that's the case, why can't we? And this is why I would make a bad politician, because I would walk away from my Democratic people or my Republican people or whatever, and I would go to the other room and be like, can we talk? Because I'm just trying to understand. Why did 210 people? And this is where I think if we had a little bit more of this, and I'm not fully there yet. I'm better than I used to be, but I found in my life, this kind of thinking, how I'm talking about now, has gotten me so much more of the things that I really wanted out of life, in my marriage, with my kids, in business, work, in my spiritual walk, than staking my feet in the ground and holding on to 10-year-old truth, which might be really true, but not questioning anything else. It's hard, man.
Childlike curiosity. Childlike curiosity is the key to continuing to grow. And like you said, and man, there's a quote. I always butcher quotes. Like, me too. That's always I say. Just say the perfect quote. Yeah, right. But there is a quote out there, like, if you, right, like a man that doesn't like disagree with his former self, like he doesn't grow, type of thing, right? Like if you think the same way at 40 and you have the same values that you did at 20, like something's off, right?
Yeah, you got to be growing, man.
Yeah, like something happens, because like you should change the way you think. You should change your mind a little bit. Like there should be new information presented to you where it does rattle you. You're like, oh wow, that goes against my belief, but it makes kind of sense. And then you start going down that path and fighting. But like people don't they don't do that. They don't want to
Yeah.
do that. They don't want to take that time. They don't want to critically think. They don't want to be shaken. But that is what growth is about, right? You get new information. If you're presented with new information, you have choices. You can say, I want to continue to go the route that I'm going because this new information doesn't apply to me. Or you could say, that's very interesting. That might apply to my life. And if it does, that means the way I've been doing some things is wrong. Well, let me figure that out. Hey, tell me more about that. How come it, and that becomes just a way of operating in life. And I don't think people take advantage of that enough because it's uncomfortable, because you have to be courageous to ask questions that potentially could
make you change sides on something.
Exactly. Right? Like you could completely shift, you could completely change. But I think your willingness to check yourself and be like, all right, like, does this thought still serve me? Do I believe that side? Like, do I believe this new information? I just think that is what growth is about. That is what being a human is about. It's about continuing to learn and evolve and not just be stuck in the same thoughts that you have, over time. So
you can't, man. I mean, you can go in the Bible, you see people grow, right? You take a baby boy, David, with a slingshot, and then you see him on his deathbed, and he's like, "Yeah, man."
What's the scripture? Scripture that's when I was a child, I spake as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child.
Yes.
But when I became a man, I put away childish things.
Childish things.
It's growth. Like that's what it is. Like,
and that's for all the Bible believing people. If you don't believe in the Bible, that's just a scripture. You can take it as a nice parable.
Nice parable of wisdom for you, right? Like, but
of wisdom. But it's just, again, now always wrapping it back, right?
Yeah.
The media, if it's not profitable for you to grow in your thinking, they will try to keep you in your old thinking. And that's it. And here goes the thing. That's their business. Right. So, like, I mean, just like we can get mad at McDonald's for selling cheeseburgers that put us in cancer treatment centers, right? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. That's their business. You can choose to go to McDonald's, or you can choose to listen to the media. And that's not saying everything at McDonald's is bad. Like, I love a good cheeseburger from McDonald's every now and then. Like, I'm just, not knocking it like that.
It'll kill you. McDonald's will kill you.
It probably look.
Listen,
I'm gonna tell you. I know some people out there like the cheeseburger from McDonald's. I will say I like the cheeseburger from McDonald's. Now, do I eat the cheeseburger from McDonald's? Not often. Very little bit. Not at all.
All I needed to see was that study of them keeping the hamburger and fries for 8 years or however long it was, and it never grows mold. That's all I needed to see to know that.
They changed their recipe now. But anyway.
way to justify that.
They changed the recipes, Chris, ever since y'all found out about that. But honestly, like, and I hope everybody's getting, something from this in the sense of it's their business. Right? That's their business. Yep. We have a decision to make. What we're saying is take control of your mind by being mindful of what you feed it, the same way Chris and I are talking about taking control of what you feed your body physically, right? And what the results it can happen, things sitting in your colon, expanding, like we talked about this a week or so ago, right? It's the same thing with our mind. Be mindful of it. And also, when politics gets quiet, in our current system and structure, pay closer attention because something's happening and it may not, it just has not always benefited the majority. So just be mindful. And if you want that to change, keep shedding the light on when they get quiet and force your local politicians to stand up for the things that your community believes in. Don't have them go off to Washington or your state capital and start putting things on paper that your community did not agree with. They're there to represent your voice, period. Yep. And that's a whole nother conversation around this whole, like, the community believes one thing, but then the legislator goes up and they believe something different. How do you vote? Yep. Do you vote for your people if you feel like your people are wrong? And then you feel like you make the moral judgment call, or do you have to honor the responsibility that your people wanted that, and you just say, "Hey, I'm the messenger." That's a whole other topic for another conversation, another day.
That definitely is.
but it's something that I just want people to think about when we're talking about politics, media, and then overall, what are you feeding yourself? So that's what I got with that.
That's huge. And this would be a good place to kind of wrap up, because at the end of the day, guys, like that's the message that we want to drive home for everybody that's listening. You know, we're big on teaching and giving the perspective. There's no right, wrong. There's the perspective. It's understanding why things are happening. And I think I started this conversation kind of thinking about like the role of mainstream media, but it evolved into, you know, why are we distracted? Are you asking yourself that question? Are you asking yourself the question why you're consuming what you're consuming? There is a reason behind it. There's a reason behind what you see on the news. Like there's a reason why you don't see bills like this, right, in the mainstream media. There's a reason. And I just want people to know, and I'm sure T's there, like we just want you to know that like you've got to be aware of this so you don't fall victim to it. Part of this conversation was us saying like we kind of fell victim to it. We felt like, even us, like we're talking about it, but we know that we just have the ability to see this, like, and be like, oh man, that's what happened. But I was, caught off guard myself when I see this bill, and I'm like, I haven't heard any of this. And just 3 months ago, I was so passionate about right politics that I was like, I'm gonna make a stand in my local, and now I don't know anything about it. Is it because my life is busy, or is it because this isn't now front page news? Is it because now when I scroll down my Facebook, I don't see politics because I don't see things outside of the one or two people that I know in my network that are running for some form of government, right? Like outside of that, there's really no talk about this stuff. And so I fell victim to being fed whatever was of the time, and didn't keep my eye on, didn't keep my finger on the pulse. And I feel like this is an issue in society that we all have to face, be aware of, understand that like you will fall victim to it if you don't consciously, aggressively like take control of your mind, of your actions, of what you're letting in. It's such an important conversation. So
yeah, and that doesn't, and I want to make sure I point it out. It doesn't mean you should only be posting about politics as important. Like that's not what we're saying. We're talking about just to be aware. Right. But what we've noticed is people typically are more aware because people are posting. What we're saying is you don't need to be dependent on somebody else to post about it to be aware. Yeah, exactly. Like, I just want to make sure, we were all, all clear on that.
Exactly. And so, we want to hear from you guys, your perspective on if you feel like, you've taken your pulse, your finger off the pulse in politics or some other area. Are you seeing the things that we're seeing, or are you not? Do you think that, right, the media is not controlling, or not, there isn't anything behind it? Maybe we'd love to hear that. Like, I don't know how you could justify that.
We're open. We're open to have that conversation. Please.
Hit us up. Let us know. Like we always tell you, we want to hear from you. We want to continue to have the conversation. Leave some comments on this YouTube, or right, like hit us up personally on Instagram or Twitter or wherever you're at, because we want to continue to flourish and have these conversations. These are important conversations to have, just to be aware, just to understand the information we're being fed, not to take anything away. Again, we're going mainstream media. I talk about that, but like this bill is also something that's incredibly important, just from a topical standpoint. Like, maybe we can spend days and have people come on just talking about this bill and its implications. Yeah, because honestly, like this is huge. I mentioned it. Like, this could divide America again. Absolutely. Like, like literally, it really could be a situation where we're like, we have some states like, I don't want to be a part of this no more. Yeah, absolutely. It's quite possible. And so these are things that are incredibly important that we got to even dive into more and not be taken aback by the things that the news wants to show us right now about people dying, right? Like, because this is about us flourishing and moving forward as a country. So, T, you have any last thoughts, man? I think we kind of, Yeah, we hit it, man. I think just continue to be aware. That's it. Yeah. Be aware, be cognizant, be present. Don't let anybody influence you, even though we're going to get influenced. We all get influenced, but be aware of it. But question it. That's it. Yeah. Where is it coming from? Why? Ask why. Ask it again. Ask it again. That's it. Critical thinking. I think that's where we'll end this. We just want you to be aware. We want you to critically think. We want you to know that like you're not a victim to anything, even though you can fall prey to it. You aren't. right? You can control all these things. And that's what will ultimately, right, tie it all in. This is what will ultimately give you your own perspective. When you start questioning things and saying, I believe that, but I don't believe that, but that's interesting. But then you all of a sudden aren't just regurgitating what you've seen, what you've heard, the thoughts of the people around you. You're actually critically thinking to develop your own perspective. And that's what's going to get you through life. It's your own beliefs, your own thoughts. That's why you have to be able to change and grow and learn and all those types of things. It's just such an important conversation, guys. So we appreciate you for
no mindlessly forwarding, sharing memes that are not true.
Exactly. That's a whole nother episode.
But we'll end that here.
We'll end that one there. Guys, we appreciate you listening again. Hit us up. Feel free to share this with a friend. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, because we want to continue to push these conversations and give that perspective. So until next time, we're signing off. Say goodbye, T.
Bang, bang.
Bang, bang is the new intro and outro. Take care, guys. God bless. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Perspective Podcast. We hope this conversation made you think a bit deeper, gain some insight, or even possibly even gain a brand new perspective. If you did enjoy it, do us a favor. Please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or anywhere else you stream. Leave a review to help more people experience these conversations and potentially change their perspective as well. And lastly, as always, T and I want you to connect with us. So follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. You can find us just by using our names. And there we get a chance to hear your perspective. Until next time, God bless.